let's go ahead and talk about our inverter and transfer switch installation. Now, what this is going to be for is if you want to convert your battery power into 120 volt electrical power for your outlets that are solar prepped ready. Now, there are two options of doing this. You can use a inverter that has a transfer switch built in, or you can do like I did and do an inverter with an external transfer switch. For me, for the cost, I would rather do the external transfer switch. Not only is it for the cost, it's also for monitoring and for future applications as well, if I wanted to install extra electrical loops. So this system that I am running is going to be a 2500 watt continuous power pure sine wave inverter and a auto switch. Now, what the auto switch does is it turns your shore power and your inverter power into a safety circuit. So your shore power will be wired into your transfer switch, as well as your inverter power will be wired into your transfer switch. All links for all products will be in the description below. Now, as for my setup, what I did is I planned out my inverter setup for this particular situation, and I used a 1/4 inch piece of plywood to mount to my studs inside my forward storage compartment on my camper. Once I had that planned out, I built all this inside, had it ready to go. That way, all I had to do was connect the power from the shore power side to the auto switch and back out to the camper side, and then also the power from the battery to the inverter. So let's talk about that solar prep loop. That solar prep loop does just run your outlets that are solar prep ready. So that does not include your microwave or your air conditioner. It's only for those outlets that are solar prep ready. All right, so when it comes to the wiring for this setup, what I have here is I am using my inverter, one of the outlets, to feed into the transfer switch for the pre-wired solar loop outlets. And then as you can see up here, I have the pre-wired solar loop coming in, and then on the other side is going back out. For the wiring part of this portion, what you want to do is you want to take that loop that was pre-installed, and you're going to make sure that you have no power on when you do this. No shore power connected, no battery power on, nothing. I know it's not 12 volt, it's 120 volt, but always make sure that you have zero power in the side whenever working on electrical. So once you get your loop pulled out, what you're gonna do is you're gonna cut your loop, and then once you cut your loop, you have to test which one is your line side and which one is your load side. Now, what I mean by line side, that's gonna be the power coming from shore power into this compartment. And what I mean by the load side is that's going to be the power coming back out, going into those outlets. So you want your line side coming in, your load side going out. To test this, there are a couple ways to test it. I highly recommend you get a qualified electrician if you don't know what you're doing or are uncertain around electricity, because this could be very dangerous. Again, this is just an informational video. Take your own risks. So what I did is I cut my loop, I stripped back the casing, and I also stripped back the wiring to have some metal exposed on each part of the electrical, and then I wire nutted them. Now, once I wire nutted all four, I hooked shore power up, and then I turned on my power inside the camper. That's when I came out here and I used a multimeter to read which side had electrical current of 120 volts. Once I figured out which side had the 120 volts after the cut was done in the loop, I knew that that side was my line side, or my incoming current side from the camper. The other side that had no current on it at all is going to be the load side. That's the side going back to the receptacles inside the camper that are in your solar loop. The next step is to wire in your power from your inverter into your transfer switch. So the way I did that is I went to Home Depot, or you can get it on Amazon, and I got a 12-inch heavy duty 12 gauge extension cord. And I plugged that extension cord into the outlet and ran it into the transfer switch. Now, when you buy this, what you're gonna need to do is you're gonna need to cut off the end that has the outlet on it, or outlets, depending on which one you do. And you're going to have to strip it back and get your wiring individually. You're going to have a black, a white, and a green, most likely, depending on what brand you buy. But that's going to be your hot, neutral, and ground. And you're going to wire that into here. Again, if you are not an electrician or don't know much about electricity, make sure you get somebody to do this that does understand 110 electrical wiring. The other thing you're going to need to do for this system is you're going to need to get your battery power to it. You're going to want to make sure that you're using the correct wire gauge for your system. That is going to be determined by your power need for your inverter, as well as the length of the run. So what you want to do is you want to look up the length of the run, and then you're going to want to look up also the power, that your continuous power that is going to be drawn or needed. Again, just because the inverter says 2500 watts doesn't mean you're always using 2500 watts, but you want to be safe up to the limit of the continuous power on your inverter. So for my inverter, I used aught gauge or zero gauge. Make sure you figure out which wiring you need for yours. Also, some of the inverters that already have the transfer switch installed also come with some cables that are the correct size for what they want, but they'll be too short. Just make sure that if you buy longer cables of the size it came with, for example, let's say it comes with 4 gauge. If it comes with 4 gauge and it's too short and you need to up the run longer, make sure that you're not outside those parameters of the length that it needs to go down to a 0 gauge or aught gauge wire. Now, as for the power coming in to the inverter from the battery, you can see here that I ran my cables through the floor with some silly putty, or it's sealant, and I'll post a link in the description below. But basically you drill a hole just big enough to get the wires through, and then you pack it with the silly putty on the bottom and top. This channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. It really helps out with getting more videos, more reviews, more installs, more tips, and more tricks posted to the channel. Hit that like button, and then throw me a comment below. Tell me what you'd like to see next, and any questions you may have about this. I always try to follow up with all my comments and make sure I get them answered within 24 to 48 hours.